I'm Chris Milgate. I own Tightline Media, and I'm an outdoor journalist based in Idaho. I published my first book in 2019, My Place Among Men. It's a collection of the most dynamic outdoor stories I've covered in the last 2 decades. There's one chapter in that book about salmon. I'm a fly fisher, but I've never caught a salmon in Idaho, so this is the first time I'm seeing one in the wild, and it looks awful. It's a floating corpse, decaying flesh, frayed fins, and it's mind-blowing. This fish is 850 miles from the ocean. It had to swim through 8 dams, 4 rivers, and 3 states to get to its grave. I'm only seeing the finish line, and it is remarkable. So I'm thinking to myself, what on earth does the rest of this 850-mile journey look like? And in that moment, I solidify my next project. I'm following salmon migration from the ocean to Idaho. Then the pandemic hit. None of us humans were moving, but the salmon were still moving. What's the safest way to pull off the impossible during an impossible time in our planet's history? What I came up with worked, but it took a lot more out of me than I ever anticipated. This is the backstory. We were all in isolation when the pandemic first blew up, so I knew this had to be a solo affair. No crew, just me and 5 cameras, heading straight to the Pacific Ocean, then following the fish back home to Idaho. I'd been talking with my local Toyota dealer for months about the project, so with a bit more nudging, Toyota ponied up a truck with a longer bed than the one that I own. I needed a longer bed because 4-wheel camper put my house in that truck. I lived and worked in isolation out of a truck-camper combo all summer while following salmon migration from the ocean to Idaho. Hi, I'm Chris Milgate, and I'm your field guide as we travel by truck and camper from the ocean to Idaho. I'd never been to the Oregon coast, so I had no idea what it looked like. But after seeing every mile of the river corridor across the state, I can honestly say the gorge is misty green gorgeous. And I have no idea what it looks like with people. I saw no one unless I was interviewing them, and even then we weren't close. I stayed 6 feet away, I wore a mask, I showed them my temperature chart, I carried disinfectant wipes. Wipe it off. I worked 15-hour days, then I parked at night to import footage, eat, and sleep. And I had designated spots for this. I called them D&Ds, not B&B like bed and breakfast. D&D, like drive and dash. Drive in at sunset, dash out at sunrise. These were empty vineyards, private driveways, and closed boat ramps. All places offered by kind people helping me safely navigate the Pacific Northwest during a pandemic. Come on in, watch your head. And my rig was the perfect setup for working and living solo. I would write and edit at night while I ate my dinner. Then I'd climb in my bunk, pass out for a few hours, wake up at sunrise, and do it all over again. During the day, I shot underwater, overhead, and right at you. And when I wasn't shooting footage, I was driving and driving and driving. Salmon swim 850 miles of river from the ocean to Idaho. I drove 4,606 by road, plus 80 miles by raft. The dams are impressive, all 8 of them, and there's no getting around them without help. There are pipes and ladders to help salmon pass dams, and there's always some kind of hazing going on to keep predators from picking off fish. This is mile 146 of our 850-mile It's like a fireworks show, but it's for the birds. And I'll admit it, what started out as misty green gorgeous got old in a hurry. It's always misty, damp, and cold on the coast. I wore a raincoat and rubber boots every day. And wind is the devil. A big gust came through and dumped my main camera in the dirt, busted it in 3 places. There was no replacement option, no repairman nearby. I taped the pieces together and limped along. John Day is mile 215 of 850. That means I shot more than half of this journey with a broken camera. That's not something I'm proud of, but that's what you do when you're dealing with the impossible during a pandemic.
Welcome to Idaho.
Yes! As soon as I entered Idaho, I knew I would make it the whole way. I honestly wasn't sure in Oregon and Washington. You can wipe down the cord as far as you want. There are bruised legs, ripped muscles, and I found a tooth. It washed up between my feet early one morning while I was brushing my teeth, and I totally panicked. I mean, there's no fixing your teeth when you're in the wilderness. Then I saw reason and I realized it wasn't my tooth. So it's possible there was a dead deer upstream from my camp and its teeth washed into my camp while I was brushing my teeth. During all of this travel, I rarely had access to a shower, so I wore a hat to hide my bad bedhead. That hat rubbed my ear, creating a sore that wouldn't heal. I came home every few weeks because I would get ahead of the fish on the migration route. So on one of my trips home, I had my doctor look at my ear. He didn't waste any time, skin cancer, and he took the top of my left ear. The fish fell apart on their migration journey, and I was falling apart, and it was obvious, so I had to address it. I have a distraction that refuses to be eliminated. So let's address it, then move on. I have skin cancer. It took me a long time to figure out what to say about it on camera. And I thought a lot about what I did when I was younger. I didn't do tanning beds, but I vividly remember laying out in my backyard, covered in cooking oil, with a beach towel made out of aluminum foil. Aluminum foil! And I would just lay there, cooking myself like a piece of chicken in the sun. It's shameful, and it's my own fault. It is painfully humiliating to lose a chunk of your body because of your own actions. Skin cancer addressed, let's move on. Salmon. By mid-August, the fish were hanging around, but they weren't hooking up. They were waiting for something beyond our basic human instincts. I had everything but the final act at the final mile. I had to leave the watershed empty-handed. It was so disappointing. But I don't have control over what the wild does. I only have control over what I do. I had several injuries that needed attention, so I went home for surgery. The first chunk of skin to rebuild my lost chunk of ear came from my face, and it died. The second chunk came from my scalp, below the hairline, because nobody wants hair growing out of the top of their ear. That chunk of skin survived, but I had a serious reaction to the surgical glue. My ear swelled up to the size of a red tuba, and it oozed fluid for days like I'd rolled in poison ivy. But somehow, the second skin transplant survived. I also had stitches in my chest from a rafting injury, and I was still limping along with a broken camera. It's dusty dry here. It's at this point that I decide I'm taking away from the story, not adding to it. I keep myself on camera for the rest of the road trip, but decide to pull myself out of the film. Salmon should be the story, not me. What happens in front of the camera goes in the film, Ocean to Idaho. What happens behind the camera goes in the book, My Place Among Fish.
Female.
In early September, I received a text from the Shoshone-Bannock tribe researchers. They track reds. Reds are where salmon lay eggs. There were reds in the Yankee Fork of the Salmon River. And I'm so excited, it's like Christmas morning. I'm not allowed to run or raise my heart rate because I have stitches in so many places. So I slowly pace the banks, looking for fin in the current. I'm in my waders. I have a broken camera. I have stitches in my face, my ear, my scalp, my chest. I am a mess. The fish care nothing about my condition, but I care everything about theirs. When I finally see fin break the surface of the water, I stop. I don't speak. I don't move. I watch. Only 37 fish made it to the finish line. I'm looking at one of them. I know the risk it took to get here, and I know it's exhausted. I'm exhausted. And I know there's no other place this fish should be, and there's no other place that I should be. I have 25 hours of footage to shove into a 26-minute show. It's like shoving the stepsister's foot into Cinderella's slipper. But if I do it right, and I do it well, watching those minutes will mean just as much to everyone else as that moment on the bank means to me. There's so much that goes into Mother Nature's migration from the Oregon coast to the Idaho wilderness. It's hard to believe that it even happens with all of us weighing heavy on the watershed with our own wants. But it does happen. And now we'll all see what it's like to live for one reason, and that is to swim for future's sake from the ocean to Idaho.